Why did a Green Party emerge when you already have quite a number of parties on the spectrum? And the fact is that none of the other parties recognize the change that's taking place in the relationship between people and the earth. For a very, very long history, 100,000 years or more, it didn't matter what people did on this planet. There was just so much abundance on the planet, and our ability, our numbers, and the power of our tools was not enough to disrupt things on anything but a local scale. And we did that here and there, but we couldn't cause planetary problems. And as we've moved into sort of the last half of the last century, we started to be populous enough and have powerful enough tools that we could actually outfish the Grand Banks. Like the cod fishery on the East Coast was so abundant when white people came here that you could drop a bucket over the side of a boat and pull up codfish. They couldn't get away from a basket. And today they're an endangered species. And they were a foundation of the economic system of that part of the world for like 400 years. And it was a classic situation where if somebody was ambitious and they fished more than they needed to get the basics for getting by, they'd have a little extra money that they could invest in their boat or their nets or help on the water or whatever, catch more fish and make more money. And that meant that they could invest a bit more and catch more fish and make more money and catch more fish and make more money. And that classic economic success story went on for several hundred years, and then it collapsed. And if you're really succeeding, you're not going to collapse just over a course of a couple of years. So there's something that wasn't being paid attention to that was important, and that of course was the fish stocks. How much fish is in the sea is an important detail. It never was before. Only recently did we have the capacity to even imagine fishing out the Grand Banks, and now we've depleted that stock, so there's nothing there. We have to pay attention to the resource base. We have to pay attention to our wastes. And these are things that the Green Party is saying, hey, we need to do this. And the other parties are still stuck in a pattern which worked very well in the past, but can't work now. What happened with the codfish is happening with forests. It's happening with soil fertility. It's happening with fresh water. It's happening with fossil fuels. It's happening with the ability to absorb our wastes. Every one of those is a wake-up call of the human family saying, we're now mature. We're no longer an insignificant child-age species. We're fully mature. We're responsible to the laws of nature, and we will be tried in the court of natural selection. And there's only two laws we have to obey. We have to obey the law of the minimum, which is how much resources are available compared to what we need. And we have to obey the law of tolerance, which is how much of our waste and how much of the byproducts of our activity can we tolerate and can the environment that we depend on tolerate. These things didn't matter for 100,000 years. Now they matter. None of the other parties, until the Green Party started to threaten them, would acknowledge that we have to deal with these things. So the party had to emerge to represent those issues, and the evolution has been spectacular, because now we're actually, knocking at the door of getting seats, and of course we'd have 24 seats in the House of Commons now if we had proportional representation. So it's, there's a lot of Canadians that think it's a good idea. There's a couple of things about life that I want to talk about a change in how we manage things. This is what the question of direction is representing. Life is not that hard to maintain. If you look at the I've got to try to keep from doing my tangents because we really don't have the time to do all that. There was an experiment done in the 1600s by a fellow named Jean-Baptiste von Helmont. This is the period of time when science was re-emerging from the Middle Ages. People were studying everything, trying to get a real grasp of what's going on in the world. And von Helmont was studying life. This was in the Netherlands, part of Europe. And he did an experiment where he took a 5-pound branch from a willow tree, and he took a bunch of soil, dried it bone dry, and took exactly 200 pounds, put it in a big pot, pushed this branch down into it, covered it over with metal with holes so the air could circulate, but dust wouldn't settle on the soil. And he started watering it with rainwater or distilled water. And the branch put down roots, and the tree started to grow, or the branch started to grow. And after 5 years, he separated the soil from the branch and discovered that it had grown to 169 pounds. And then he dried the soil out again and weighed it and found that it had lost less than 2 ounces. So there's 164 pounds of growth from less than 2 ounces of soil. And the rest was carbon from the air and oxygen and hydrogen from air and water. Because most of life is a gas. And I mean that not as a pun, but as a dual meaning. Not only is the material substance that we need to live largely gases, but life is fun. For human beings, our capacity to enjoy being is huge. There's a reason we're called human beings and not human havings. Once we've got the basic food and shelter that we need to be secure, We get far more satisfaction from relationships with each other, from learning things, from appreciating, singing, dancing, playing sports, worship, service. Things that we do with our lives speak more to us as beings than anything you can purchase. You can't sell it, so it doesn't work in a money expansion system. But we could be having so much fun, we wouldn't have time to consume the planet on a level that was dangerous. This other idea has a wonderful background, which I'm not going to tell you. It's all in the book. But it's an idea called pattern integrity, and it's represented by a slip knot on a piece of string. And the thing about it is that as the knot moves down the string, matter enters one end and passes out the other. And that carries on until there's absolutely nothing left in the knot that was there when you first saw it. It's the same knot. And the thing about that's relevant to ourselves is that we're pattern integrities. The physical substances of our bodies are changing all the time. In a year, most of it changes. In 7 years, there's practically not a trace of any of the physical substance that you were made from 7 years previously. But you're the same person. We're spirits, enmeshed in the stuff of the earth. Over the course of a lifetime, an enormous amount of substance comes into your body, becomes you, and passes back out. The Navajo have a term for this total of all of the substance you're made from the day that you're conceived to the day that you die. They call it your long body. Every one of us has a long body. And the vast majority is outside of your skin. The long body of every person in this room is in the environment right now, most of it. The long body of every person on this planet, of every tree, of every animal, of every insect, of everything that has ever lived on this planet, the vast majority of their substances is in biomass right now. So one of the very first things that a mature species needs to do is get toilet trained. It's totally irresponsible to take substances that are dangerous to life and to release them into the biomass from which all life builds its forms. And you know, you'll find the Green Party is very strong on making sure if we're producing things that are toxic, let's just find a better way to do it or completely control it. This is where I usually introduce Donna and her hunger strike and the issue of uranium up near where we live, and she'd be happy to answer questions about it if you're interested. We ended up in a citizen's inquiry with an enormous amount of information about the nuclear system. So if you ever have anybody saying, oh, we need to have nuclear energy, you can explain to them all the reasons why it's bad news. But I'll move on because we have a situation where we can have environmental successes, but if the system continues to expand, those just get overridden, and we're dealing with them again. SO2, the sulfur dioxide that caused acid rain, got to be a big enough problem that there was a Canadian and an American citizens movement that finally got both governments to work, and that's no small feat, to pass legislation to say we will cut SO2 emissions by 50% in 10 years was the plan. And when it was finally legislated, they found that they actually were able to do that job in 7 years. And they extended the goal a little bit and improved on it, and that was great, except they were source emissions. Each power plant on average, or car, or any of the emitters had to be on average reduced by 50%. Because the economic system is expanding all the time, we've grown to the point where we have almost as much acid precipitation now as we did at the point where we enacted that legislation. So we can save a forest or save a water shed or something like that, but as the system expands, it's going to need those fish and trees and release the waste and whatever it is on a larger and larger and larger basis. Growing is great for children. If any one of us were to double our size, we'd be in trouble. It's not good for adults. We are an adult species now, and growing is no longer what we need to do. We need now to become sustainable. We need to take responsibility for our impacts and learn to enjoy ourselves. Relax a little bit about this growth stuff and appreciate living and manage the world as if we want to stay. Manage it as if our children and grandchildren matter.